more than 50 years, Sergeant Richard Hui, a Korean War Marine, has been collecting military memorabilia to honor some that he left behind. This is his collection, honoring servicemen from many nations and from many times and many wars. I hope you enjoy it. A rare uniform of a World War I aerial squadron pilot. He's a major, and this is the full uniform, including breeches, boots, and the overseas cap. In the 1930s, Claire Chennault formed the AVG, a group of volunteer fighter pilots who helped defend the Chinese from the Japanese who were invading. This is his uniform. World War II German enlisted fighter pilot, a U.S. bomber pilot, a Japanese kamikaze pilot. Gregory Pappy Boyington was an American combat pilot who was a U.S. Marine Corps fighter ace during World War II, receiving both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. Included in the collection are full or partial uniforms of such famous World War II generals as Douglas MacArthur, Bernard Montgomery, and George S. Patton. Also included is the full uniform of Audie Murphy, the most highly decorated U.S. Army soldier in World War II, including all of his medals. This very rare uniform is the dress uniform for an enlisted Marine who served in northern China in the 1930s. Paratrooper from the 101st Airborne who jumped into Normandy. An Air Force policeman who was Richard's partner in Okinawa back in the 1950s. Warren Chan, an airborne ranger. Green Beret Sergeant Trimmer. General Lo Yang-ting, a national Chinese Air Force general. Lieutenant General Bull Flanagan, World War II and Korea veteran. This is his winter uniform. As a Marine, Sergeant Hui collected a number of Marine uniforms. This is Sergeant Major William Nickel, a World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veteran. The 11th Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, David Summers. Sergeant Major Marty Martinez, who fought in Korea and Vietnam. Brigadier General J. Hubbard, who fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam as a fighter pilot. Lieutenant General J. Hooley, who fought in the Gulf War. Lieutenant General Lemuel Shepard, one of the most famous commandants of the Marine Corps, who fought in World War I, World War II, and Korea. Lieutenant General Chesty Puller, who fought in World War I, World War II, and Korea, and is one of the most famous Marine leaders in history. General Peter Pace, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who fought in Vietnam. General Richard Herney, a former Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, who fought in Vietnam and the Gulf War, highly decorated fighter pilot. The uniform of a China Marine sergeant. Brigadier General Kenneth Wickham was one of the co-founders and adjutant, later co-commander, of what was called the Devil's Brigade. Uniform belonging to Admiral Gorman. Marine Colonel Peacock. Major Kurt Lee, the first Chinese-American officer in the U.S. Marine Corps, very highly decorated. Uniforms belonging to William Bull Halsey and his opponent, Japanese Admiral Yamamoto. Two of the most famous generals in the U.S. Army recent history are General Schwarzkopf and General Westmoreland. These are their uniforms. Brigadier General Elizabeth Hoisington, who served in World War II. Also in the collection are some Russian uniforms. The first one is a Major General's parade dress uniform. The second, a colonel in a tank battalion, and the third, a World War II Major General's parade uniform. This jacket belonged to an air crewman in the Flying Tigers, Master Sergeant Broussard, who carried a flag to Suribachi. Unfortunately, he was shot on the beach. World War II enlisted Marine fighter pilot. U.S. Army Captain Jim Dengari, who fought in World War II at Guam, among other places. Colonel Moorhead, a World War II P-40 fighter pilot and a triple ace. Also in the collection is a U.S. National Park Police hat and full uniform and saddle with blanket. Hats belonging to a Coast Guard Admiral, General Omer Bradley, and a U.S. Navy Admiral. Australian Army hat. Rare dress caps worn by enlisted and officers in the U.S. Marines in World War I. The U.S. Marine helmet from Wake Island in World War II, and a World War II pith helmet. This hat belonged to a Russian admiral. Petaluma Police Department helmet, San Francisco Police Department's cap, and an LAPD helmet. The Blue Angels Airshow uniform. One of many flags intended for Mount Suribachi on Okinawa, this one unfortunately never made it past the beach. Uniforms from an RAF pilot and an RAF dispatch rider in World War II. A British paratrooper who participated in A Bridge Too Far, and a Royal Marine dress uniform. This is the desert uniform of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the famous Desert Fox. This is how it looked on display a few years ago. It includes the hat and even the goggles he wore. This uniform belonged to Field Marshal Kesselring of the German Army in World War II. This uniform belonged to an SS colonel in World War II. This uniform belonged to a nationalist Chinese major general in World War II fighting against the Japanese. The uniform on the right belonged to a Japanese colonel, horse-mounted infantry in World War II. These are the medals that were won by and worn by Audie Murphy in World War II. The collection includes Congressional Medals of Honor for Army, Navy and Marines, and Air Force, as well as the Silver Star, Navy Cross, and Distinguished Flying Cross. Richard has created displays for some of the uniforms over the last 30 years. Here are photographs of some of them. This beautiful painting was painted to commemorate the meeting of the Big Three in Yalta: Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. As a former police officer, Richard has innumerable contacts with police departments all over the world. Here are some uniforms of people he has served with. Along with innumerable police memorabilia, Richard also acquired this Canadian Mountie dress uniform of a sergeant, including saddle and complete tack for the horse. He's acquired a number of badges from police departments around the world. A very rare badge, California Highway Patrol Sergeant Number 1, issued in 1928. And here's an image of the officer it was issued to.